This is Ken Rockwell with KenRockwell.com and KenRockwell.tv. Today, let's take a look at Nikon's 85mm f1.8 lens for their new Z series of camera. This is a new lens. It just came out in 2019. It is made in China. It feels pretty plasticky. The front is all plastic. This ring is plastic. This ring is plastic. This focus ring is metal, I believe, just for show, as this is metal. But overall, it's a relatively lightweight lens. It has a lot of glass into it. This is Nikon's most complicated and advanced design ever for an 85mm f1.8 lens. Nikon has been selling 85mm f1.8 lenses since 1964. Here's my 1977 version of the 1964 optical design, which they sold through 1977 as a manual focus lens. This lens, of course, is super sharp, as all of Nikon's 85mm lenses have been since 1949 when they sold their first f2 for their rangefinder cameras. Here's a sample image. Of course, it's super sharp. If you can't get sharp pictures with this lens, then you're just not a sharp photographer. Now, the reason it's as big as it is this is an extremely advanced optical design. It is not a basic design designed for a compact or point-and-shoot style option. It is designed to support the 45 to 50 megapixel cameras of today and go to the much higher resolution cameras of tomorrow and still look awesome. The reason to get this as opposed to use one of the older lenses on an adapter is, well, if you like to spend money, you can buy the 85mm f1.8 AFS autofocus lens, use it on your FTZ adapter. It works great. It's super sharp. It autofocuses well, and you've saved quite a bit of money. However, this lens, half the reason you buy the mirrorless cameras today is because you want to look cool like your friends, in which case you have to buy this and not be a hokey dokey with an adapter. But honestly, if you're a practical photographer, you don't have to go buy new lenses. The focus ring, you can focus it to other things if you really wanted to, but one of the advantages of the Nikon cameras over all the other mirrorless cameras is they are the only brand with a well-working manual focus override, such that anytime you turn this ring, you get manual focus. The other brands either never work or only work in certain conditions that somehow are never the conditions under which you're operating. It has no distortion. Nikon claims it's dust and drip resistant. It has a 9-blade diaphragm, which is very nice. What's bad is it's made in China. It's not as small or as light as it could be, but as I said, that's for the excellent optics. And it also costs about twice as much as the F-mount version of the lens, which also works well. It's missing f22. Every other Nikon 85mm lens goes to f22. This one only goes to f16. Do you care? I don't know. It does have an autofocus mode switch, which is great, but it does not have a VR switch to control the operation of VR in the camera. That's relatively okay because even though I like to turn it off if I'm on a tripod for time exposures, I've never seen any defects in my images just by leaving the image stabilization on all the time, which I do because it's too much of a trouble to go into the menus to fix that. Performance-wise, autofocus is accurate, as it always is with mirrorless, but it's not that fast. It is not as fast as some of the SLR lenses were, even back in the 1980s, but don't tell anybody that. The 85mm f1.8 original autofocus lens of 1987 was actually the AFD version, about 1992, was always super fast. This lens is not. You'll hear a slight hum as the autofocus motor slowly goes from point to point. I don't think anyone will have any issues with it, but it is not instantaneous. Manual focus is great. Again, just grab this ring. There is focus breathing. As you focus this in and out, if you're using it for motion picture work, you will see the size of the image slightly grow or contract as you're focusing closer or further away between your actors. Bokeh is pretty good, as all of the 85mm f1.8 lenses have been. There is no distortion, which is great. You don't need to turn your distortion correction on or off because you're going to get the same results. You may as well leave it turned off with this. The exposure is uniform across the aperture range. There's no visible fall off if you leave the fall off correction active in your camera. I can put 7 regular filters on this lens and still get no vignetting on full frame. I gave up trying to put 7 filters on there. The key is with 7 filters, you're not getting any vignetting, so don't worry about that. There's no significant flare of ghosts on my Nikon cameras. There is no color fringing other than spherochromatism, which is another thing I'll show. Macro does not get that close. This is as close as it gets, which is honestly the same as every other 85mm lens Nikon has made for about the past 50 years, which is a bit of a disappointment. I would think with Nikon's claimed multi-focus system that this lens would focus closer than this, but it does not. Spherochromatism is when the lens is not perfectly in focus. You will sometimes see green or magenta fringes on things. This lens suffers from a moderate amount of spherochromatism, which is unfortunate, but not that bad, because one of the advantages of having green fringes on things in the background out of focus is that most of the time when you have plant matter and trees and bushes behind you, they get even softer. So it actually helps your bokeh. So I'm not going to complain about this. There is no image stabilization. Any stabilization you get is inside your camera, which honestly with the Nikons is pretty good. Sun stars are also reasonably good. By the time I stop down to about f8, I can get some pretty nice sun stars. And they've got about 18 points due to the 9 blades. If I want to compare this, honestly, it's just as sharp as the Zeiss Otis 100mm f1.4. The Zeiss doesn't have autofocus. It's manual focus only, so it's a bit of a poser lens for people that really don't do anything, just stand around on tripods all day long. But the Zeiss Otis is for a special breed of man. It's not actually for photographers. It's for guys who like night stuff, which is another story entirely. Versus an adapted AFS, 85mm f1.8G, to be honest, this 1.8G lens is really good. And if you're a cheapskate, there's no reason not to shoot this till the cows come home. You'll get fantastic images. The optics of every 85mm Nikon lens are superb. You'll get great results and save yourself quite a few $100s. I would not adapt the old autofocus lens, which focuses mechanically with a screw connection, simply because it will not autofocus on the Z series of camera with the FTZ, because a design flaw in the FTZ neglected to include the autofocus motor required to make half of Nikon's lenses autofocus on the FTZ. So you're back to manual focusing. So I would pass. Likewise, using manual focus lenses like I showed on an adapter like this, that's for the crazy. It's manual focus, it's clumsy, it only has a couple of the auto exposure modes, in fact only one auto exposure mode. I would pass. So that's the story. This is an optically superb lens. It's a little more plasticky and made in China, which I don't like, so I'm not that bullish on buying it versus using some of my classic lenses. But honestly, would I buy this lens? Depends what you want to shoot with it. If you're doing portraits and headshots, by all means. For general purpose use, no way. I prefer using a zoom because it's more flexible. I don't usually need f1.8, so I'm perfectly happy with the little 24 to 70mm f4 that usually comes with the Nikon Z cameras. Of course, you people know who you are. If you want a fast, sharp lens, by all means, this is fast and sharp, and you will never have any reason to complain about the optics, which are essentially flawless. If you're a cheapskate, get the AFS G lens for half the price and use it with the FTZ adapter, which you probably got for free when you bought your camera or can get for free when you buy your camera, depending on Nikon's promotions, which change every few months. And that's it. That is what I think of the Nikon 85mm f1.8 lens for the Nikon Z cameras. Thanks for watching Ken Rockwell, kenrockwell.com, and kenrockwell.tv.